As hyped as we all are for Cyberpunk 2077, there is not a chance in hell we would ever forget about the Witcher series. The first Witcher game launched CD Projekt Red into the stratosphere of recognition. The second game solidified that they're a force to be reckoned with. And the third game, which garnered accolades from critics and the public alike, pushed them into becoming one of the most renowned studios in the world today. It isn't just the quality of their games that's impressive, it's also their commitment towards consumer-friendly practices, offering free DLCs and reasonably priced expansions on top of a stellar experience. While all eyes are currently on their next project, Cyberpunk 2077, which has seen nothing but overwhelmingly positive impressions since journalists got a chance to see some behind-closed-doors gameplay at E3 2018, there are those out there who will understandably miss the beloved gritty dark fantasy series. Some people are wondering if it's possible that we will see more full-fledged Witcher games, or if Witcher 3 marked not only the end of the trilogy, but also the end of CD Projekt Red's pursuit for that saga. Well, fortunately for those asking these questions, the topic came up in an interview that CD Projekt Red CEO Adam Kaczynski recently participated in with Polish website Bankier. Given that the website is in Polish, I did have to rely on Google Translate to lend a hand, and from what I can tell, it does seem as though it's done a pretty good job. Though if there's anyone who'd like to make any corrections, please feel free to chime in by leaving a comment below. Anyway, so the interview began by expressing well wishes for the two franchises CD Projekt Red is currently focusing on, Witcher and Cyberpunk, to which Adam responded with how he also dreams of continued commercial success for upcoming titles, expressed that the sky's the limit in the gaming industry, and touted how so far, the Witcher series in its entirety has sold over 33 million copies. Witcher 3 continues to sell really well, by the way. It's not one of those games that launched and then faded away into obscurity. It continues to draw in new crowds every year at impressive numbers and impressive longevity. From there, the interviewer finally asked Adam the golden question, the one that all players ask themselves: will there be The Witcher 4? Adam responded as follows: the first three Witcher games were by definition a trilogy, so we simply could not name the next game The Witcher 4. This does not mean, of course, that we will leave the world of The Witcher, created by us for over a dozen years, who love and still demand players around the world. The Witcher is one of the two franchises on which the company's operations are to be based in the future. Today, unfortunately, I cannot reveal anything more. Now, the wording here is particularly important. I know some might interpret this to mean that future Witcher games might be along the lines of Gwent or similar types of spin-offs, but Adam references the original trilogy before talking about the existence of a next game, one that won't be named Witcher 4 given the conclusion of the trilogy, but he very clearly seems to imply that a next mainline entry is not out of the question and is part of CD Projekt Red's future plans. Assuming I'm reading into this right, it would seem as though CD Projekt Red might take the Mass Effect approach with Witcher titles moving forward. You may recall that with Mass Effect, we got the original trilogy starring Commander Shepard, and then the fourth game was entitled Mass Effect 4, but rather Mass Effect Andromeda, marking a brand new chapter starring completely new characters, following a completely different plotline, set in a completely different galaxy, though still set within the same universe. I get the sense that whatever the next Witcher game turns out to be, it won't be too dissimilar from that. Geralt's story is done, so we'll definitely be playing as another character. Whether it be someone we already know from the original trilogy or a brand new character entirely, it'll likely be a completely different plotline that's likely set in a completely different time, and it will likely explore brand new regions within the world of Witcher. So rather than Witcher 4, the title of the game will likely be Witcher blank, and that could mark the beginning of a whole new trilogy if CD Projekt Red wants to take it that far. Now, it's worth keeping in mind that whatever plans the Polish studio may have for the Witcher franchise moving forward, we won't see it come to fruition until years and years. It's taken them long enough to adapt Mike Pondsmith's cyberpunk world into video game format, with Cyberpunk 2077 having been in development for 6 years or so now, and based on what CD Projekt Red and Mike Pondsmith himself have implied, it'll be a couple more years before the game is out, with the most common predictions being sometime in 2020, which would be poetic given it's the same year that the Cyberpunk 2020 tabletop RPG takes place. I would also have to assume that CD Projekt Red intends to put resources into expanding Cyberpunk 2077 after launch with 1 or 2 major expansions, and that will consume another year or 2. On top of that, you've got the multiplayer mode that the studio is working on for the game, which they intend to launch sometime after the initial release of the single-player experience. Now, the silver lining here is that once they do begin development on the next Witcher game, it's highly unlikely that it will take them nearly as long as it's taking them to create Cyberpunk 2077. One of the biggest reasons Cyberpunk is taking so long to make was because the studio had to build a brand new next-generation game engine for it, Red Engine 4, which is years of work on its own. But once Cyberpunk 2077 launches, that engine will be primed and good to go, so for the next Witcher project, less time will be spent building the tools needed to make the game, and more time will be spent on actually making the game. Another contributing factor to Cyberpunk 2077's long development time is the fact that CD Projekt Red is exploring uncharted territory with this project. It's their first time building a cyberpunk world. It's their first time making a first-person shooter RPG. It's their first time doing a lot of things, as Cyberpunk 2077 is a vastly different game from something like Witcher. And the studio's developers having to adjust to that likely played a major role in why development on the game hasn't been silky smooth. With Witcher, on the other hand, this is a world and type of game CD Projekt Red is now very familiar and experienced with, so it should be a lot more smooth sailing on that front, and that will likely reduce the development time significantly as well. Either way, it is too early to be talking about Witcher right now when Cyberpunk 2077 is still in pre-alpha stages. Just know that one of these years, eventually, Witcher will likely make a return, though from what Adam said, we should expect something of a soft reboot for the series, something that clearly distinguishes itself from the complete original trilogy while still taking place in the same universe. Assuming Cyberpunk 2077 launches in 2020, I honestly wouldn't rule out 2024 or 2025 as likely candidates for release windows for the next Witcher. But obviously this is all a shot in the dark, so don't quote me on this. Anyway, that's all the news I have for this video, so with that, I would like to end this news update. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoy my content and would like to support this channel directly, consider donating on Patreon. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Yong Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Yong out.